and I will hand off the mic to Alok, who's the president of the chapter. Alok.
Thank you, Jose. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alok Kakkar, President for ISACA GWDC chapter. If you don't know, we are the world's largest ISACA chapter. Our members include Washington, D.C., Virginia, and Maryland. I worked on a various board positions for last 12 years. And I'm proud to say that our board, speakers, instructors, everyone who is involved with us from different backgrounds has an equal opportunity to succeed, and it's a very, very diverse board. And you can see, like, we live in a diverse world. It is very important that we recognize and embrace it. Diversity starts from a top leadership, and I think it trickles down. Other aspect of diversity, which we will be talking, is inclusion, which really means to call out differences and contribute with everyone. And we should respect diversity and respect each other. You will see, like, our website and a chapter website. If you have any questions which are, you have for us, please send it to membership. We do read all the questions and things coming out to us. So it's a volunteer organization. We might take a little time to answer back, but I do promise that we will respond to you. And also I thank all the volunteers, directors, facilitating, organizing, and planning all these webinars. We have conferences, and this would not be possible without your dedication to serving our community. And if you are thinking to present or volunteer with us, you see those two emails, programs at ISACA, gwdc.org, and academics. So please reach out to us. We will highly appreciate anybody's efforts. With that said, today it is my honor to open up the panel discussion on diversity and inclusion in technology. I thank all the leaders on a panel discussion and appreciate their time. With that said, I will hand over to Jose Torres, who is our host for our panel discussion today. And he will go through some couple of other items before we start our panel discussion. Jose.
Thank you very much, Alok. So for everybody in the crowd right now, these are our upcoming planned programs for fiscal year, for this upcoming fiscal year for ISACA Greater Washington, D.C. chapter. As you can see, we have online conferences and online panels. So these are the projected topics and the dates of when we're going to hold them. Key item here is, our chapter. This is your chapter, basically. All the members of ISACA Greater Washington, D.C. And, we're here to help you out with your CPE needs. And this is why we're offering this to you in this very, different times these days, free admission for all these online events. If you're not a member, there might be a minimal charge, but we strongly encourage you to be a member of the chapter so you can avail of these free CP events this coming fiscal year. Now, we're also just like, to thank all the sponsors for making these events happen. And if you're interested in sponsoring, feel free to reach out, outreach at isaca-gwdc.org. So right now I'll be introducing the moderator for the event today. Jermaine Stanley is a cybersecurity IT risk advisory leader, has 25 years of experience. He has a master's in software engineering and bachelor's in electrical engineering and is a CISA. He's currently the vice president of our chapter, ISACA Greater Washington, D.C. as well as compliance and security subject matter expert at Proofpoint. I could say all these great things about him, but what's very important to me is he's a great friend and a great mentor, and I think he'll do an amazing job with all the panelists today. So, Jermaine, I'll hand off the mic to you.
All right, thank you, Jose. I really appreciate the introduction, and thanks for all the panelists for joining us. And also, thank you for everyone taking some time out of your day to join us on this important topic. As we all know, the conversation or the awakening in the United States has been happening as relates to race relations, diversity and inclusion, et cetera. We also have seen many companies and organizations spend a lot of energy and resources to seem to address this awakening in the early phases. But lately, it seems like some of that momentum has slowed down a bit. That's why we're here today. And we want to keep that conversation going. We have what should be an enlightening conversation lined up for you on why diversity matters in technology, but also organizations and to everyone. Our panelists, who you'll get to know shortly, because I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves, will share with us their backgrounds and experiences in technology and why diversity matters. There's some intersectionality there. By the end of our discussion, we hope you have a better appreciation for why having a diverse workforce is in the best interest of not only the organization, but for everyone. We also hope that the information our panelists share with you today empowers you to go back, have those courageous conversations with your leadership, and hopefully these things will influence them to make changes in policies and how they handle diversity matters, inclusive matters within the organizations. So with that said, I'd like to allow our panelists to introduce themselves. So as you probably heard earlier, we're going to have two sets of panelists. So panel number one includes the following people. So our first set of panelists includes Ms. Wanda Jones-Heath from the United States Air Force. She's the current CISO. We have Dr. Sandra Cruz-Pohl, who is also from the DC area. She's with the National Science Foundation. We also have Marcus East, who is within the CTO office at Google. Thank you again, everyone, for joining. Wanda, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to participate in the panel. I am Wanda Jones-Heath. I am the Department of the Air Force Chief Information Security Officer. I have 30 years of federal government experience. I've had the opportunity to work across many disciplines within the Air Force, particularly in the IT field for about 16 years. And then the remainder of that has been really focused on cybersecurity. Had the opportunity for development throughout my time as a civilian. I started as an intern and worked my way all the way up into a senior executive service position. I've been in a senior executive service for a little over a year now. And so that's been very challenging to now migrate over into senior leadership. I've earned 2 master's degrees, been a part of various development and leadership opportunities within the Air Force, certifications, and I'm now working on my PhD in leadership. I have about another year left for that, and then I'll continue to focus on my career. Glad to be a part of the panel and share.
Thank you. Dr. Pohl.
Good morning. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for inviting me to this panel. It's a very big honor for me. My name is Sandra Cruz-Paul, and I'm from Puerto Rico. I'm a professor of engineering. I've been a professor for over 25 years in electrical and computer engineering, graduated from Penn State. And I have like a little bit over 2 years of the federal government at the National Science Foundation. And I'm here to, to hopefully answer your questions and hopefully inspire everybody to increase the diversity and inclusion in technical and in engineering fields. Thank you.
Marcus.
Thank you, Jermaine. Thanks to Jermaine and the team for inviting me to participate in this panel. Really excited to be talking with you all today. I'm Marcus East. I am a technical director in the office of the CTO at Google. And my background's a little bit different from the other panelists in that I am what you would describe as purely commercial. So started my career in IBM 26 years ago as a systems analyst building missile defense systems and anti-submarine helicopters. Maybe cross paths with Wanda, I don't know, but definitely kind of in that space. I spent 6 years there, also spent 4 years at Apple where I ran e-commerce solutions for Apple. But that's half of my brain. I love tech and really are very focused on technology. But I've also spent time as an executive in major consumer-facing brands where I've been responsible for leading the technology. So I was Chief Digital Officer for Marks & Spencer, which is the biggest clothing retailer in the UK where I'm from. And immediately before joining Google, I was the Chief Technology and Chief Product Officer at National Geographic, based a few blocks from the White House. So super excited to be here, and diversity has been a very important part of my career. So this is a really important topic for us to be talking about.
Thank you, Marcus. And last but not least, Miss Renee Small.
Hi, everyone. Jermaine, thank you for having me. And Isaka, thank you for having me today. I'm Renee Small, cybersecurity super recruiter and the CEO of Cyberhuman Capital. I'm also a co-host of a podcast and LinkedIn live stream called Breaking Into Cybersecurity. And I am here to share my experiences from an HR perspective and from recruiting in the industry.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Renee, for that. So let's just get right to it. Could you, and we'll start with Wanda on this. Could you give us a sense of your background growing up, and how did you get interested in information technology?
Yes, so I am from South Carolina. Grew up there, went to college there. Shortly after college, I left the area. But as a young child, I realized that I loved math. I was a straight A student in math, took a lot of honor classes in high school. I was always fascinated, probably starting from the or grade of 7th grade. I remember my first computer. You hook it up to the TV, and while other kids were playing outside, I was tinkering with my computer and all those kind of games. Anything that was technology, I loved it. I thrived on figuring out complex problems, analytical skills. And so that was my first love, has always been my first love. I majored in computer science during a time where diversity was truly an issue. I can remember being in college where I would be the only female sometimes, and definitely the only African-American in the class. I did not have any African-American teachers in high school, in that math courses, nor in college. And so, that didn't deter me from going after majoring in that technology, still loving IT, because that's my background. And every chance I get, I love still tinkering around with computers and software development and things like that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I remember those days, Commodore VIC-20 or Commodore 64 or something like that. I remember the big buttons that used to get stuck all the time. So yes, I do. I can relate. Dr. Cruz-Paul, same question.
So my background, actually, I have program code that is 30 pages long, but I'm an engineer, not an IT person. So like one that I love engineering, I love science since I was a little girl. And I had my father always tell me, like, it doesn't matter if, you know, everybody's a guy, you can do it. And that really meant, that was really stuck in my mind that I could do it no matter what. So like one that I was sometimes the only female in many classes. Sometimes none of the professors in electrical and computer engineering were female at that time. I'm talking 35 years ago. So now it has changed, luckily, you know, so that's good. And sometimes in many meetings, I was the only one speaking Spanish that was not serving the food or doing other very important work. But, you know, I felt like, but that didn't deter me either. And I really, really loved and tried to excel. Sometimes you have to work double because you have to prove others that you are in the right place and that you're not there because there's a special funding for you, or you're there because you belong there. So that's a little bit hard, especially for women, because, you know, if you ask a guy at that time, very young, you want to study to review this for the test, they're like, oh, she's hitting on me. I'm like, no, there's nobody, there's no females here. I have to study with somebody, you know. So sometimes I just study by myself, or just, you know, came up with other techniques to do things and you know, to survive. So, but it was worth it.
That's great. You know, you breaking stereotypes, right? And you mentioned that, and you know, I'm of Puerto Rican descent as well, so I can relate. But you're also, you know, talking a little bit about the unconscious bias as well that we have to deal with if you are from a diverse background. You know, there are certain things you have to do extra just to be even. You know, so thank you for sharing that. Marcus.
Yes, so my background, I'm a little bit different in that I was born in the UK. I grew up in leafy North London, a part of London called Enfield. And UK is a very different and interesting environment from a perspective of diversity. There's only about 2.5% of the population that's Black, for example, versus 13% here in the States. And I, for most of my youth, found myself, I was always the only Black kid around. I was the only Black kid in my class. I was the only Black kid in my scout group. I was the only Black kid in my church. But interestingly, and this may be due to my parents being Jamaican immigrants who thought they were a little bit superior to everybody else, I never understood that being Black was meant to be a disadvantage to me. And so when I was at school, I was top of the class. In fact, I was so annoying for the teachers that I had to spend 2 hours a day being taught by the head teacher because I was way ahead of the rest of the class. And by the time I got to the end of what we call junior school in the UK, I was asked by my teacher, my maths teacher, Mr. Martin, if I'd be interested in learning how to program. And so he kept 3 of us behind who were good at maths. He kept us after school for an hour a day and taught us how to program. So I was programming on a ZX81, which had 1K of RAM and a Z80 processor operating at about 2 megahertz. But that was where my love affair of technology started. And in my career, it was similar though. Even years later, when I joined IBM, I was often the only Black face in the room. When I was in the defense team at IBM, I was the only Black person in a team of over 100 people. And one of the reasons, interestingly, that they thought me to be a good fit for the team was that I was different and I came from a different background. The boss who hired me, Chris Gibbon, he said, look, everybody else here is someone that went to Oxford or Cambridge and came up through a very traditional upbringing. We want to get some new blood, some new talent in here. And that really worked for me because by the time I'd been in IBM for about a year, I'd already got my own business unit. I went from being an individual contributor to being a manager. So my experiences have been very positive, but I'm very conscious that diversity has been an important part of that.
Thank you, Marcus, for sharing that. And, you know, I have a similar experience. I worked in .com in the telecom industry. I was with a company called Ameritech back in the mid 90s. And I was like you, I was one of the few in the room that was different, if you want to say. And so today, you know, it makes my heart feel warm that we're able to talk about this more openly and with such support behind it. So thank you for sharing that story. Renee, same question.
Yes, sir. So my dad was a computer science professor. So there it is. So I had the computer as a child, grew up in actually the school the elementary school that I went to was an all-Black school. We all excelled. There was no, you know, the teachers were African-American, the kids, most of us were African-American, and the standard was just high, period. So we excelled. I loved math like Wanda. I was a total incomplete math nerd. My dad, rest his soul, probably wanted me to be a mathematician growing up. But I also love to talk and I love to hear people's stories. And so I had this combination of skills when I got to undergrad. I went to NYU, New York University. I got a degree in information technology, but always, always, always loved recruiting and trying to get people into the field. So my first job was as a project manager and always was trying to bring in other interns and other people in the field, and eventually transitioned into recruiting and HR for security. So awesome. That's pretty much my background and what got me here today.
All right, awesome. Thank you all for sharing those stories. And you know, Renee, what you're sharing, and I think Marcus mentioned this as well, you know, not having how you look and where you're from be considered a disadvantage. You're kind of taught that, right? So you have a different perspective and view on that. And I think that, you know, your trajectory might be a little bit different than others who are always told, well, you'll never amount to anything, or because you're from this side of the tracks, you don't have access to this information. So that's that systematic, you know, approach to how racism in the United States in particular came about. But it's good to hear that there are stories like that. I'm sure there's others out there that relate to this. So thank you again for sharing. So our next question that I wanted to throw out there was, you know, if you could share, and we'll start with Renee this time. What were some of the challenges you faced in the, you know, space that you're in, the industry that you're in? Do you feel you had equal opportunities compared to other people from other social demographics? So people who are mainstream in that sense. Renee.
Yes. So I always felt that I had the opportunities to get in the room. And my parents are also from the Caribbean. So Marcus, when he said his parents, his Jamaican parents, my mom is from Barbados, my dad was from Antigua. And it was just like, go in and you know, take what you want, go for it. So there was never, I never felt like there was an opportunity that was out there that I couldn't go for. I have been in organizations, I think many of us have been in organizations where we've been discriminated against or what have you, but it has never stopped me from moving forward and continuing to pursue what I wanted. So if I was gonna go for something, I was moving forward and I was moving people and whatever else out of the way to get to where I need to be.
All right, thank you for sharing that. Marcus, back to you.
Great question. I think that, as I was starting out in my career, one of the things that really strikes me now is that the people I worked with, the senior executives in IBM who were leading the defense unit, they took me under their wing without me kind of knowing. So I remember vividly, I started in IBM. I was the first person that had been hired for 9 years because IBM had gone through some tough times and had the biggest corporate loss in history. So 1994, I joined. And one of the bosses said to me, he says, you know what? He says, you're one of us. He says, you're a baby blue. You're going to be here for the long haul. So they arranged a little mentoring program for me where 14 of the most senior people in IBM invited me to go and spend a week or 2 weeks with them at a time just learning about how do you operate as an executive? How do you run a meeting? How do you prioritize your work? And I didn't realize at the time how important that was going to be to me, because it really helped me to feel super comfortable in a work environment. None of my family had worked in an office environment before. My dad was a nurse, my mum was a nurse, my dad had worked on the railways. So to be in that environment, to have that little bit of extra support was really helpful to me. But I only learned about 10 years after that, there was a factor that I hadn't identified. And one of my managers, a gentleman called Peter Brakel, he is actually a passionate civil rights advocate and fighter. And in fact, despite being a young, blue-eyed, blonde British man from a super wealthy family in the UK, during the 60s, he had come and spent a couple of years in the States, as he described it, getting beaten up by the police as a civil rights demonstrator. And so whilst he was never explicit with me about that being one of the reasons that he took me under his wing, as we're now still friends 26 years later, and we often meet up and talk about dinner. And he talks about, for him, it was an exciting opportunity to actually make a tangible difference by taking some of the principles that he believed in and applying them in his work. And so, and it went full circle. He mentored me, and several years later, his son asked me if I would mentor him. And so I feel that that's been a really important part of my career. Never felt that I was held back, but I think probably similar for the reasons that Renee talked about. I didn't know what the rules were. And it was a few years later in IBM, and when I started coming to the States and I got to understand more about the culture here in the United States, I realized that many of my colleagues who were people of color, they felt inhibited, even if nobody was explicitly telling them that they were inhibited in some way. And I think that I benefited from not having that, as Renee and I talked about before. But I'm also super conscious that I have a role to play in helping others get to grips with some of the challenges that they do face.
That's great, and that's, you know, every bit counts. And I'm glad both of you shared that story, that similar experience, because sometimes what you don't know, you know, may not hurt you, but we also heard the other side too. You have to be aware of some of the things that may hurt you. So good points there. Dr. Cruz.
Yes, well, I think I had some challenges mostly because of being a woman. For example, one time they told me I was too feminine to be an engineer. And they never tell a guy that they're too masculine to be an engineer anyways. I was one. But also several faculties said things to me like, you cannot have a career and a family. And the guy that said that had 5 kids. And yet I graduated summa cum laude from Penn State before everybody else in my group with 2 little girls. So I actually credit my 2 little girls to inspire me, because I had to show that I could do it. I had to really discipline myself, my time. And as I said, I was coding things 30 pages long, but I had to go home to read books, you know, to read Dr. Seuss. So I think changing my level to very basic level to, you know, playing with blocks and Legos, to going back to programming, really actually I read later on that it really helps you. So I always tell my 2 daughters that they help me graduate faster than anybody else. But anyways, many comments like that I had to face, that like, you know, you're here because you're a female, you know, and like, okay, let me show you my grades, you know. That's not true. So many things like that I think that has changed, because again, that was 30 something years back. But now one of my daughters is a professor, the other one is an engineer. So I'm like, yes, I made a good job. But it's something that really needs to change. Those stereotypes that people see on movies, they see on the toys, that the woman is, you know, is always the silly one. They don't help, and it's everywhere. So it's even women have these stereotypes inside of them, because that's what you see on TV and movies. And we the first thing we have to do is to really become aware that those biases are there in order to really fix them.
Thank you for sharing that, Doctor. And I can't agree with you more. I'm a dad. I'm sure there's a lot of parents on this call. I actually have daughters, and I have a stepson, but I can tell you that anything that I talk about on this topic, I always have them in mind in regards to what path and what things can I show them, so that they don't have to fall victim to those stereotypes as you described. And I think the more we educate ourselves and the more that we have conversations and enlightenment with others, we'll get through some of that. But it takes time. But thank you for sharing that. Wanda, same question.
I also agree with a lot of the comments. I think it's about attitude. And also, my parents made me believe I can do anything I wanted to do. No matter if I was female, no matter, the color of my skin, they pushed me to do what made me happy. And so this career field made me happy. I'm often the only one. And so I try to see the good in the situation. I try to look at, what motivates me and make me who I am. I know I have to work extra hard because of others' perception, but that doesn't matter to me, because what I want to do from my career standpoint, from my home life standpoint, revolves around me and how I feel about what I can bring to the table. I don't let others define who I am. I feel I control the parts I can, and I can't control how others perceive me, but I can show them what I can bring to the table. Similar to Marcus, growing up in the Air Force, I raised my hand when no one else raised their hand, even if it was something that I probably didn't want to do. But I felt like if someone, a mentor or a sponsor, called my name to do something, then I did it. Paid big dividends, and allowed me to demonstrate my skills, things that I've learned. The reason I have been successful is because I give 100%. And so if I believe in me, whether others do, I really can't, fault them. But if I believe in who I am, I'm confident. I know my skills. I know my abilities. I know that I'm confident. And so for me, the opportunities are there. They're there for everyone. It's how you take advantage of the opportunities and make it your own.
Thank you. Thank you. That resonates with me as well. Thanks for sharing that. To continue to move along here, could you all take a moment to describe in your words, and we'll start with Dr. Cruz on this one. Describe how diversity matters and how can organizations benefit from a diverse workforce? Dr. Cruz.
Yes, well, diversity matters because first of all, we're living in a diverse world. And if you look at so many studies, including some done at Rutgers University, at MIT, and many, many others, you see that the more diverse the more diversity you have in any group, the better the problem-solving skills, the conflict resolutions, the creativity, the business performance. There's even a study saying that they're 33% more likely to have greater profitability when in terms of an entrepreneurship or any corporations. Also better groups in general. So that's one reason to really, if I was an IT company or an organization, I will really do everything I can to have a diverse group of people, and not just diversity, but inclusion, because many people think, oh, it's just bringing people from diverse backgrounds. And they need also to develop that culture of inclusion in which everybody feels welcome, everybody feels that they can thrive, that they are heard. So that's that would be I don't want to, I could talk forever, so I'm going to leave it there.
Thank you. Thank you. I like the enthusiasm. Hey, Marcus, same question.
For me, diversity is something that I think about every day from the perspective of our business. So Google's leadership in particular understands that you can't develop products for the world if you don't have a workforce that reflects the world. And that manifests itself in many ways for us, in that one of the most interesting teams or divisions within Google is called the Next Billion Users. And that is a team that is being built in Africa. It's a few thousand people strong right now. And it's the belief that, yes, we have 1 billion people using the internet daily today. Let's focus on the next billion people who are going to be coming on board. And the reality is, you can't take the very traditional Stanford middle-class white male and expect them to be able to build solutions that will work for a very, very different audience. So I think that diversity is simply good business. And I think that the companies that are most successful and will be most successful in the future are those that really embrace and understand that. And when it comes down to me personally, one of the things that I have seen in my teams, and I've led teams up to 1,000 people strong, and one of the things that I've seen is that if you don't have diversity, your team is much weaker. And it's weaker because you get less different points of view, you get less conflict, which is in some respects, you know, a lot of people say, well, we try to avoid conflict. But when I was in Apple in particular, one of the features of Apple's culture is that Steve Jobs wanted to create an environment where different people with different perspectives and different experiences would come together. And it was his belief that you only make the right decision when you bring all of those different voices in. So to build on the point that Sandra made, it's not just about the diversity, it's also then about the inclusion and making sure that everybody has a voice and that there is an equal distribution of power. So I'm very fortunate to work for a company where that is at the heart of much that we do. There's still a long way to go in terms of getting more representation for women and people of color in Silicon Valley, but I do believe that those companies are making the right moves.
Thank you, Marcus. Wanda, want to take a swing?
Oh, sure. I definitely agree with everyone. You know, one of the things that in today's environment, having groupthink from our old time of doing business will definitely lead you to an unsuccessful venture. Different perspectives, different skill sets. In my day-to-day operation, you know, I value everyone's opinion, because when I implement a policy or something I send out to over 700,000 airmen, I have to think, how will they interpret it? And that takes a different thought pattern. How will they implement it? And then how will they actually be able to successfully execute it? And so when I think about why it's valuable to have different perspectives, that's what I deal with every day.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And Renee, same question.
So to everyone else's point, diversity of thought is something that we talk about almost daily on my podcast. And specifically to Wanda's point, in the information security space, cyber criminals don't care what race you are, what sex you are, what nationality you are. They're just coming to get whatever they're coming to get. So if companies don't have a diversity of thought, meaning all, you know, the surface level, the you know, gender diversity, racial diversity, all of that, the inclusion piece, to Sandra's point, where you're looking at everyone and giving everyone a voice, they're just going to be at a disadvantage. Additionally, I was reading or looking, I saw an article recently, and Stanford did a study. And one of their studies was around, do investors really care about gender diversity in particular? And that study looked at technology companies and finance companies. And the investors were, the research study that went around, pretty much the end result was that the companies that had more diversity, did better from an investor's perspective, had higher stock prices. So, you know, we're all living in a capitalistic society. Everything is about economics. It just makes economic sense to be more diverse, 100%.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much, Sarah. I think we're at a point where we can have our next polling question. That was a great topic there. And let's see, what is our poll say? Should be on the screen. There you go. And as the panelists have, indicated, more diversity in thinking, just creates more opportunities for new products, new ideas to emerge, new ways of thinking to emerge. So embrace it as you go back to your organizations. And I know that a lot of folks on the call are probably aware of this, but it's good. I mean, it's proven that those who embrace it have a better bottom line. The numbers are out there. Do the research. All right. We're looking at, we're at about almost 90% of voting. We'll give it another 10 minutes or 10 seconds, I'm sorry, for the poll to close. And then we'll stop. All right. So it looks like we've had about 87% of the folks say, yes, we did know that. That's good. You're well educated. So you're empowered. So go back to your organizations and continue to have those conversations. Thank you for being a part of the poll. So another question that is out there that I'd like to ask is, share some advice for folks who are of diverse backgrounds, who may be earlier or in middle of their careers. Marcus, you go first.
Yeah, I think this is such an important question.
Mm-hmm.
My advice is very much based on my experiences. Mm-hmm. There are three things that I'll focus on because I could talk for hours about this topic. One is, and building on something that you've heard from Wanda, Sandra, and Renee, is be confident in your skills. If you're going to be successful, you invest the time to develop your skills so that when you are then competing against other people, you know what you're capable of and you know that you can do the job. So that's your absolute foundation. So you can't blang it. But I know a lot of my American cousins sometimes joke about winging things. You're not going to wing it in technology. You need to do the hard work, make the investment, get the qualifications. That's step one. Step two is really important. And I think not enough people, particularly people of color in the States, do this. Understand the success criteria for the role that you're in and the environment that you're in. And one of the things that Peter, who I mentioned earlier, sometimes laughs about is he says, even when you were 22 years old, you would come into my office and you would say, what do I need to do to get my bonus at the end of the year? And he would say, why? And I would say, because I want to buy an apartment or I want to buy a new car. And he would say, well, this is how we're going to assess people's performance this year. And this is what your expectations are. And I would look him in the eye and say, so if I do A, B, and C, I am going to get a top performance review and I'm going to get my bonus at the end of the year. And that's one of the things he asked me to coach his son, because he said being explicit about understanding the success criteria, particularly in the corporate world, is essential. And then the third thing I would add is simply you do need some support. So yes, we're all confident people who want to go out there and we want to take on the world, but you're not alone. You do have to reach out to people that can advise you. If you're making difficult decisions and you're not sure, it doesn't hurt to ask for help. It doesn't hurt to ask for advice. And I found in my life that people are incredibly receptive to that. Even very senior people in Apple, if I would reach out to them and say, hey, I've got a challenge here, would love to get your perspective. They are often willing to share that perspective and may even be able to help you to some extent. So feel confident because you've got your skills. Make sure you understand what success looks like and get some help. You're not alone when it comes to moving your career forward.
Thank you, Marcus. Hey, Renee, you want to take on that question?
Sure. and I'll reiterate what you talked about, Jermaine, yesterday on our podcast. Find networking opportunities. So organizations like this, ISACA's Capital DC chapter, is an awesome place to come in, learn about the organization, learn about your field, learn about the industry, and being a volunteer and making a commitment to your career growth is so important. So that's the first thing that I would say to do. And the second thing is to get a mentor, because to Marcus's point, having someone that can, you know, bring you under their wing, or multiple people, you don't have to have only one. I recommend getting multiple different ones. Mentors in your field and places where you would like to go, is they will provide you with the type of experience that you could never get on your own. They've been there, they've done it, they can give you different perspectives, different experiences, and guide you in a way that it's unimaginable. So those would be my two tips for anyone that's coming up in the field today.
Thank you. Dr. Cruz.
I think I agree with most of what Vince said. It's very important to mingle, to learn about other cultures. You know, when I went to Penn State, there was a Puerto Rican group. But okay, I went there, but I also have parties with Turkish people, Polish people, you know, all type of peoples. And I taught them how to do pasteles and tostones, and they taught me how to dance different. So I think it's very important to mingle, to not separate yourself, you know, and also to use humor. This was very useful for me, to create awareness about unconscious bias. Many times the professor was like, "Huh, you got a good grade?" And I'm like, you're not saying, you know, you're not surprised because I'm a woman, right? And they were because of that, but in a jokely manner, they suddenly become aware, and they don't do it with a bad purpose usually. They just, you know, it's the media. So I don't blame anybody. I have my own biases too. Also, even if you don't have a mother or a father or other that encourage you and tells you you can do it, know that you can. And always you're going to find a moment where you say, oh my God, this is so much. No, remember that you can do it. You know, keep trying, even if it's writing it on a board or something, that you can overcome anything. You have everything that, you know, what it takes to succeed. And like they said, find a mentor. Show your value. Don't be shy to ask for a bonus or a raise. Be a great employee. Give frequent email reports, even if you're not required to, you know, so that your boss or your superior knows that you are doing your work. So there's so many things that, you know, have been said that you can do, but those that, you know, are summary.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cruz. And Wanda.
So I think of it as, you know, building your brand. All the things that have already been said as part of your brand, you know, being professional, you know, doing your, achieving your performance, building your network and having a mentor, even a sponsor, which is different than a mentor. A sponsor is someone who can pick up the phone and, you know, make that phone call on your behalf. Or, you know, we sit around as senior leaders, sometimes we ask other, you know, coworkers, you know, I'm looking for this type of person. Do you have someone to recommend? That is your sponsor. You know, be comfortable in your skills and ability. You know that you have value to that organization or any organization that you desire to go in. Do your homework. Make sure you know the end game. You know, if you're seeking a certain position, know the details behind that position. Do your homework before the interview. Know something about that organization, and better yet, know how you would impact that organization up front. In an interview, they may ask you, you know, what do you see as something we can change? You know, be prepared to answer that question. You know, do your research up front. And I always leave folks that I talk to and mentor along the way is, when opportunity knock, how will you respond? respond. Will you be ready or not?
That was great. Thank you very much. And I'm going to throw up another polling question because we're trying to keep an eye on time here. So our next polling question should be coming up momentarily. And let's take a few seconds to respond. Thank you.
So while we have the poll in place, somebody posted a very interesting question here. It came from Temi, and the question was, I know I need and desire a mentor figure in my career. How do I even go about that? So does any of the panelists would like to answer that?
I'm happy to have a crack at that. I think that, first of all, look for those people that model the behaviors that you would like to develop in yourself. So one of my mentors is a lady called Jennifer Bailey. She's one of the most senior women in Apple. She is the VP of Internet Services there. And what I've really liked about her was I saw that she was very strong and very focused, but she was also very human and very focused on taking care of her people. And therefore I sort of gravitated towards her as somebody that I wanted to learn from. And I do think that having a mentor for the sake of a mentor is not as valuable as finding a mentor who really inspires you that you can learn from and will help you to model your behaviors. That would be my advice.
And I would add that, you know, it has to be someone you trust and that you believe will tell you the truth, even when you don't want to hear it. And you have to be able to receive that truth to be able to change the behaviors that you desire.
Wow, thank you very much for those responses. And I hope that the audience, it resonates well with them. I'm going to share the results of the latest poll here. So it looks like we have most of the folks are in the mid part of their career. And we do have several executives or folks who are later in their career. So again, thanks for sharing in that poll. So this is probably going to be one of the last questions we can get to today. Why should young people of diverse backgrounds strongly consider the IT industry? Renee, why don't you go first?
So this week, I read two articles. One talked about the increase in job postings for security talent. It's at 20%. I believe that was a DICE poll. And then there was another one about the increase in IT talent at 28%. So in the middle of COVID-19, in the middle of the pandemic, things that we've never seen in our lifetimes, there is an increase in cybersecurity and technology talent. So if you're a young person, or if you're, moving around or transitioning in your career, getting into IT is a place where you will have security. It's one of the one areas that is continuously growing, continuously changing. And I encourage as many people as I can to get into this industry, because it's one of the one areas that in the middle of the pandemic, active, aggressive hiring is still happening.
Wow, thank you very much there. Dr. Cruz.
I don't have anything else to add. Renee said perfectly. I completely agree with her.
All right, thank you very much. Wanda.
I definitely agree with Renee. The world that we live in now is changing. And I know from a cybersecurity perspective, we can't find and keep good people. The pool is so small and it's fun. We have a lot of opportunities, and the more that we can get to come into the IT STEM arena, I'm happy, because I'm looking for great talent all the time. So there's other companies, and the sky's the limit if you are willing to jump into the pool with the rest of us.
And Marcus.
Yeah, just to build on that, I would say it's fun. I have a lot of friends and peers who went into financial services and became stockbrokers or went to work for a hedge fund, and none of those people had much fun. They earned good money, but they didn't have fun. Everybody I know in technology has had fun building a career, doing stuff that they're passionate about. And I think my first boss at Apple said it the best. He said, Marcus, this was during my first performance review. He said, I believe that you would do this job for free because you love it so much. And I had to shrug my shoulders and say, probably, but I hope that's not going to undermine my bonus this year. And we sort of laughed it off. But for me, that's key. You can do a job that you really love and enjoy that's relevant to the world.
Thank you very much for that response. That is awesome. And one last question for the panelists before we get to our last polling question, which Jose will take on for us. What can policymakers do to enhance the position of the United States of America in the IT space? Dr. Cruz.
Well, I think they should use science-based strategies to not only increase diversity, but to develop that culture of inclusion. So it's like, forget about trying to make people fit, focus on making people thrive, to bring in their new, talents and the diversity into the group without feeling that they have to inhibit themselves, because that's not the way for them to really bloom and contribute creativity and other things that are needed in IT and in any group. So I think they could have mentorship programs. They could have strict policies of no harassment allowed and other things. But there's many literature there of science-based strategy that do work. So they should try to use them to implement them in their environment.
Great response. Hey, Renee, how about you?
I think one of the things that leaders inside of organizations tend to do is look externally to bring in talent. And I think that one of the areas that many organizations are missing is to look from within their own organization for talent. So people may not know that a person sitting in HR or a person sitting in finance or a person that's sitting in a different department has an aptitude for IT, is interested in IT. They already know the culture of the company. They've already, proven themselves to be a good employee. I think having a policy of looking within your organization and really looking across all of the departments within your organization is something that's definitely overlooked and should be used more often. Can't hear you, Marcus. Jermaine, can't hear you.
Thank you, Renee. Wanda.
What I would add, I definitely agree with Renee and Sandra, is ensure our policies are clear and the intent of the policies are clear. The implementation, ensuring people accountable. You have to hold people accountable to make a difference. People will do what they want to do if they think they can get away with it. Policies are clear from the top that things will not be tolerated, or that we have an intent to recruit within, that we have an intent to have a diverse workforce for inclusion and belonging, and that our intent is that everyone has an opinion, everyone has the same opportunities, is how we take advantage of those opportunities. So I think there's always room for improvement, but accountability would be huge no matter what the policy says.
And Marcus.
Yeah, one of my heroes is Margaret Thatcher, the former British Prime Minister. And one of the things that she believed was that as a policymaker, if people are not coming to opportunity, you sometimes need to move the opportunity to them. And that led to, during the 1980s, a number of moves where the government would just pick up an entire government agency or a government department, and they would move it to a part of the country that was poor. Or was having problems in terms of development. And there was a lot of pushback and people didn't want that to happen. But what happened is, as you moved those agencies and departments into these different parts of the country that had previously been underdeveloped, you opened up opportunity for people that hadn't been considered before. And that's been a standard practice in the UK. The BBC recently split itself, where they took half of the BBC staff and they moved them to Manchester in the north of England, because they believe that they needed to really embrace much more diversity up there. I don't see that as much in the States, particularly in technology. So it's going to sound strange coming from someone who lives in Silicon Valley, but in America, we have to get beyond this idea that if you want to be in tech, you've got to be in Silicon Valley. We need to be building and encouraging companies to build offices in Baltimore, in Chicago, all around the country, because you do have to take the opportunity to people sometimes. And there are great communities out there that don't have big tech companies that have a presence. And we in Google are really embracing that and trying to put offices in different places where we can be close to the centers, the pools of talent. And I'd love policymakers to help IT companies to do that.
Thank you. That is a great response. And all of the panelists, thank you for your responses today.